as you've in both the House and the Senate, you've also had a leadership role, and within the caucus. Can you talk about? I mean, I think we interview a lot of folks who are Democrats in red states or purple states. Hawaii is a solid blue state, but that doesn't make holding governance caucuses together easy. Can you talk about some of the challenges of being in leadership when you're in this of state legislative body, even when it's a solidly Democratic one?
That is a really good question, and I think people are like, "Oh, you're such a solidly blue state. You should be able to pass all kinds of legislation." And unfortunately, that's not the case. I think at least, when I look at the states that have a split amongst parties, at least I actually sometimes envy them, because at least you know where people stand based on your party label, right? And I think the challenge with us in Hawaii is that because we're just predominantly Democratic state, you just don't know what shade of blue you are, because there are different shades of blue. Right, and it's just a matter now of you got to know every single person on where they stand, and also on every issue, but you can just never get that. You can never get them based on their label, and so it makes it a little bit more difficult. So so I think it becomes, okay, we know certain senators are the more conservative senators, or the more liberal Democrats, right? And so I think that you kind of have to play it a different way. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing, I'm not sure. And in theory, you're supposed to be really good friends with the same party governor, right? But our governor is typically always Democrat, and so we're always straddling that fine line of a lot of times it becomes personality, and I don't know if that's a good thing when it's personality. I think because Governor Ige he was the governor during the pandemic. I think that the relationship was very tenuous, because I think a lot of people felt that he was moving too slow during the pandemic. And then, of course, with Governor Green, he moves way too fast, and so people are like, "Oh my gosh, what do we do with him now?" But I think Governor Green, because he moves really fast, he tries to reach out a lot of times, and so I think he's been able to keep that relationship fairly strong. But typical times, if it's a Democratic legislature, Democratic governor, you're all on the same page, but we actually have to work very, very hard at it. It's not something that comes naturally, and we have to be very, very intentional. And so, I think it's like anything else. You look at other places, the grass is never greener on the other side. The grass is green where you actually water it. So you have to always work at things, even if you think that things are problematic in your state. I think every state has its own unique problems, but I think part of it is just figuring that out, right? And figuring out ways to make your state a better place. I think oftentimes, I have a group of senators that I always talk with, and we always say, okay, yes, the politics is hard, but will our decisions better Hawaii, right? We have to put the politics aside, and we have to look at the bigger picture. And I think we have to constantly remind ourselves that, because sometimes we're mad at our House colleagues and we want to kill their bills. But if it's a really good bill that's going to move the state forward, we have to keep that focus. And so, yeah, very, very interesting dynamics. I think keeping everyone in line is tough sometimes. And I was telling folks, I think at the NewDEAL conference that or forum, that sometimes fellow Democrats, they use our small minority caucus of Republicans against their own Democratic caucus, which is very, very interesting, right? So there is some bipartisanship sometimes.